The Road to War. Written and narrated by John Miro. Get more at servingworlds.com. 21. Death. Silence. Peace. Then, dreams. Dreams of screaming monitors, saws and drills whining, suction tubes, bone saws, implants, rejection, infection, fever, pain, and death. Death came to visit again and again. Machines brought him back, every time. He no longer woke. He was switched on. But when he was switched off, he did dream. Every time the world came back, the doctors were there. At the end of every experiment, the doctors switched him off. And again he dreamed of foothills and a woman holding his hand. The doctors moved his heart and lungs and stuffed other things inside. The doctors locked him in a room with no food until he overrode the door codes with his mind and let himself out. The doctors asked him to transform a melted blob of crysteel into a ball, a cube, an augmented dodecahedron, all with his mind. And he did. One day the doctors turned his mind off and left it off. The doctors decided they had learned all they could. But the man, the body, the shell, was kept alive, just in case. February 4th, 2350, Alliance Intercept Fleet Staging Ground, 2 million miles beyond Reach lunar orbit. Fold event imminent. A fleet of ships floated in space above Reach. Then, it didn't. For hours on either end of a fold event, unimaginable energies gather. This storm of power mixes with local atmospheres to create auroras of violets and greens. In the vacuum of space, this fury is contained, reflected backwards on itself as bolts of red and orange plasma, raging around a sphere of purest calm. While the power was concentrated and harnessed, the ships preparing for its rough grip felt nothing. Once the fold event reached its threshold, however, it was a different story altogether. After 10 months of gathering, the maelstrom reached a tipping point and breached the fabric of space-time. The event lasted for less time than the human race yet had capability to measure. When it was complete, there was once again nothing in the patch of space where the convoy had been. No trace of light or heat, no errant ripple of gravity was left behind, as the bubble of space-time was folded into another dimension. In fold, 7 months and 8 days to intercept. Like other bubbles in other mediums, the fold immediately sought a way out of its new neighborhood and hurtled along the path set for it by its makers. Forces around the fold pushed back. Light, gravity, magnetism, even time itself rebelled against the foreign body intruding where it had no business. A storm of unimaginable proportions was unleashed. Veterans of convoys past simply called this time the churn. 16 ships tumbled and rolled like dice tossed by an angry universe. Computers did the actual piloting. The humans inside weren't up to the task, even the most heavily modified of them. The crews could only wait for the storm to wane. Wait and pray not too many were lost before turbulence settled into equilibrium. Crushing gravity waves and electromagnetic pulses tossed ships into one another, or worse, to the peripheries of the fold, where gravity and time didn't play by the same rules. Ships and lives were lost while crews huddled inside steel boxes they hoped would not become their coffins. Eventually, the storm passed, as all storms do, and the brave and the foolhardy ventured out to put the fleet back together again. Days before the fold event, dozens of tenders, small, ultra-maneuverable prototypes designed for transport between the 16 major vessels comprising this fleet, had been bolted to the outside of each ship. Some were scraped off during the churn. Several of the craft smashed into each other, unable to overcome the raging storm that was the churn. Still, dozens more survived the storm and immediately knuckled down to save lives. The fleet was stacked in a diamond, 3 ships deep in the middle. Ships radiated outwards in a computer-modeled pattern to reduce the potential for ship collisions and increase the likelihood of crew survival. A fleet-wide network of sensors played traffic cop after the fold event, expanding and contracting the diamond in response to the best storm reports available for the churn. Riding the tail end was the Peter Cloak. The Cloak was an old ship. It had mapped the Reach system, explored asteroid belts, dove into gas giant atmospheres. It even spent a few decades within melting distance of Reach's star. Its dubious reward for surviving the rigors of colonial exploration? The bottom rear slot in the diamond pattern, the most unpredictable and dangerous place to ride out the churn. Cloak beat the odds again, making it through the storm with barely a scratch. Each ship in the fleet carried its own crew, a specialty service or 2, redundant supplies and crew for other ships, and a complement of the Marine Expeditionary Force that was the reason for the convoy's existence. Cloak's contribution to the war effort was to house and feed the 5th and 6th Battalions, over 2,000 fighting men and women ready and eager to stop the takers in their tracks and piss on their bodies. The ship was also home to Marine Aviator Squadron 3, making Cloak one of only 3 ships in the fleet carrying pilots capable of navigating the churn as good as, some said better than, their supercomputer counterparts. The recovery effort began with such a pilot lifting off from the Cloak, long before the Silicon traffic cops permitted any other ships with human or machine pilots to follow. That first tender hit speeds that would have crushed a lesser-equipped ship, performed maneuvers possible only by a handful of people who ever existed. That pilot's bravery set the standard for all the other small ships amidst the weird bolts of red and orange plasma at the fold's periphery. "What am I doing out here?" Willard's mouth asked back in his body. "I'm a goddamn parcel jockey!" "You ain't been that in a long time, Angel," jeered the other voice in the cockpit as Lieutenant Willard, Angel Sue, accelerated his ship away from the top center docking port on Harrison, home of the fleet's 3rd Battalion. Willard snorted. Bowen had come a long way from being a green PFC assigned to Willard's unit for the last op of the last war. So had he, Willard admitted. A few years back, Willard Sue honestly and truly had been a mild-mannered parcel service pilot, one who would have lost his shit trying to fly through this shrapnel fest. But that was before 2 years of civil war recalibrated his freakout meter, and long before anyone heard of the takers. What he saw on that flight would join the cocktail of horrors that kept him from sleeping, sometimes for days. Being busy helped, and there was plenty of busy that needed doing. Willard had dropped a team of construction and repair specialists on Harrison to plug some holes made when a sensor array tower broke free from its neighbor, the Whip. Before that, he'd unloaded the last of Rambler's crew onto Thunder with minutes to spare before a ripple of explosions sucked out Rambler's atmosphere and made it snow in the fold. He hoped Ops would send him back to ferry the repair techs from Harrison on to Rambler next. At least a couple of them were only moonlighting with construction and repair. Willard would bet his extra ration cards they were wielders, judging by the dozens of blue glowing ports lining their suits. Maybe they'd share some of Special Weapons Division's newest tricks on their next ferry ride. Willard had been flying for way too long, mapping holes in ships' hulls and ignoring the many human-shaped objects tumbling flash-frozen through the fold. He figured he was half an hour away from flying his tender into something hard and dreaming it was his pillow when he realized the churn might finally be blowing itself out. Willard summoned up the live triage map being broadcast from Fleet Ops, looking for where he was needed next. No more red ship outlines, just a few oranges and yellows, and all of those back where the churn's effect slashed deepest into the stack of ships. "I swear they stuck all Reacher crews at the back on purpose, Bone," Willard growled. "Hey, careful, Lieutenant. We are a united people now. I hear that every day on the fleet-wide." The voice sharing the cockpit's oxygen deadpanned. An authoritative woman's voice made both Marines jerk halfway to attention. "Cloak Tender 5, this is Ops initiating audio orders. Stand by for special deployment. In the meantime," the voice became a degree softer and brighter. "Outstanding flying today, Angel. Fleet owes you a debt, T5. A damn long line of souls from a lot of worlds are still kicking thanks to your flying. Bravo, Zulu. And a friendly reminder, this is a fleet-wide channel you're talking on, dumbass." Bone, Lieutenant Dylan Bowen, whistled innocently somewhere on Willard's right. Willard closed his unseeing eyes. "Copy open channel, Ops. And copy slap upside the head. Awaiting special deployment." An explosion lit up the blackness off up and to the right, the first of many. The tender automatically reduced light penetration through the cockpit windows and swung its nose up into the shockwave that would surely follow. You have been listening to Reach, The Road to War. Written and narrated by John Miro. Music, All This by Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com. Hear more of the story at servingworlds.com. Thank you for listening.